Okay, so if you are a billion-dollar model building AI company, forget about Patagonia jackets or any status symbol like that. The status symbol these days is you have to have your own agents framework, or in this case, an agents API. So what I'm going to be talking about in this video is Mistral has dropped their own Mistral Agents API. I do think there's quite a lot of things in here that are quite interesting compared to some of the other agent frameworks that are out there and how Mistral is approaching it. It's also interesting to see here that they're not trying to be the agent framework for everyone. They really seem to be much more focused on what you can do with this API and how you can actually go about building these agents that are going to work with the Mistral models. And recently, Mistral's been on a roll. We've seen a number of models come out from them. Just last week, I don't know why they joined the week of everyone releasing models, but we saw them release the DevStral model, which seems to be their latest sort of coding model. And that's also showcased here in these Mistral agents. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go through the announcement, then I'll open some notebooks. We'll have a play with the actual API and we'll see what it can do, and also get a sense of just how this is different from things like LangChain, Llama Index, even how it's different than things like the Google ADK and the OpenAI agentic framework as well. So first off, the key thing is that this is an API, meaning that it's basically something you're going to ping in the cloud. You'll see that later on when we go to actually try it in code, really there we're just installing the actual Mistral AI. There's no separate framework or anything else like this. So you can think of this as being, I guess in some ways, perhaps their answer to the requests API. So OpenAI, like many of the model providers, they have a chat API, which has been what most people have used over the past couple of years. But just like OpenAI, they've clearly seen the sort of need to expand this. And where OpenAI has their requests API, which can do a lot of these things with connectors and tools that are built in and server-side, Mistral is launching this Agents API to do the same kind of thing. Okay, so what has the Agents API on Mistral actually got, and what makes it different? Well, first off, one of the key things that I see as being a big advantage here is that they talk about having this persistent memory across conversations. So while you can have the agents do typical agentic things, you can also have this memory that you pass around, which has always been one of the frustrating things with many of the frameworks, that it can be just tedious to work out, okay, how are you going to do the memory from this? And how is this agent going to transfer part of its memory across, etc. The second key thing in here, I would say, is not actually something that's hugely unique, but is something really good to see them adding. And this is like a suite of built-in connectors, or you can think of these as built-in tools. So they've got code execution, which we've now seen, I think, on pretty much all the major providers. As of last week, I think Anthropic added this, Google's had it in the past, OpenAI had it, and then updated it again, I think, last week. But I'm pretty sure for Mistral, this is like a new thing that they've introduced here. And it makes a lot of sense with their new model, the DevStral model, being able to write code very quickly. You often want those to just run in a nice sandbox. And in this case, that's going to be running server-side. It can go and do a bunch of things for you, bring information back. The second built-in connect is web search. So this is pretty much standard. I think everyone has been adding this kind of thing. Obviously, Google has Google Search. And I think out of all the sort of model APIs and stuff like that, they're the only one to have that. Other people are generally using either something like Bing or even something like the Brave search engine, which I think has been shown as what Anthropic's using, etc. One of the interesting tools that they have in here too is this image generation. So this is actually the Black Forest models. So we saw back quite a few months, I can't exactly remember how many months, but it seems like years in AI terms, that we saw the Flux models be introduced. And Mistral was one of the first ones to, I think, do a deal with them so that they could actually serve those models, and not just the open source ones, but the high-end pro ones, etc. as well. And so this is now one of the built-in connectors for the Agents API. If you want to be able to just generate an image, you can do that. Another tool that they've released is Document Library. So this is the ability where you can just upload documents and then it will automatically do a RAG over that. So we've seen this from OpenAI. We've seen this from a number of providers. I think Mistral's actually had the API there for a while, but it's nice to see that this has now been incorporated into this so that you could make a really nice agentic RAG system here where you could use a sequential agent to basically get things out, rewrite queries, even do things like LLM as a judge with this kind of thing. So that's kind of cool to see in here. Now, the fourth one, and probably the most important one, is just going to be MCP tools. Having this ability to put MCP tools and pass them in and get your agents to be able to use them is just like a standard thing. I think that every agent, framework, API, etc., has to have now and has to be making use of. Now, the third thing that they talk about in here is the whole sort of agentic orchestration capabilities. And this is referring to things like the ability to hand off from one agent to another agent. It's also referring to things like being able to do sequential agents where you've got things step by step, which was heavily promoted by LangGraph and Llama Index, etc., but also the ability to do things in parallel and actually control it. And I think that's one of the things that made the providers like Llama Index and LangChain actually a bit more reliable for certain kinds of agents was that they weren't giving a super high amount of agency to the actual LLM to just choose whatever, whenever kind of thing. And so it's nice to see here that Mistral has got you covered both ways. Now, they've released a bunch of videos of different agents that they've already got code for and that are in their actual cookbook, which is really cool to see. You can see here we're looking at a GitHub code writing agent. Seems like everyone has been publishing one of these in the past week or so. This one in particular has been made with using the DevStral model, which they released about a week ago. But it's good to see also that they're not only just going for code users, they've also got, for example, a financial agent in here, which is more a traditional chat agent. You can see here where the person's having a conversation about something. It can go off, can get stock prices, etc. I've shown building these things on my channel for quite a while. And clearly, as the tools get better and the models get better, what you can actually do with this kind of thing is also getting a lot better. So this is nice to just see how they architected this, what they're doing, where they're using structured data, where they're using different kinds of outputs, etc. So like I said before, one of the cool things that they've done is they've actually released a cookbook with a whole number of examples of agent orchestration, of different agentic workflows and stuff like that. I think let's jump into that and have a look at just how some of these things work and give you a taste of what you can expect with this. Okay, so jumping into the code, the first one I wanted to look at was just a sort of standard serial kind of chain and see how they're doing this. If we go in here, we can see that we're just installing a single framework, setting up keys, etc. Nothing really unusual about this. And then it's just really stock standard stuff for setting up a call to the model. And it's only here that we're getting into sort of the agentic stuff, really, which is just manipulating context. We're not seeing anything really unusual there. You can see we've got this chain of basically just manipulating the context, taking the output from one thing, turning it into the other one as we go through this. So I feel like something like this, you can really do this with just plain LangChain. You can even just do this with standard Python, right? There's nothing really special in here. So you can see that we've got some manipulation of how things are going to come out here. And we can see that, okay, this is like our orchestration layer where we're just going from one thing to the next, passing it in as we go through this thread structure, getting the tweets out, etc., and then just returning it all. And this is just standard functions for doing this. So there's nothing hugely special about this, but it's a pattern that clearly works. And I feel that often people are trying to make really hard agentic things rather than just simple workflows that actually get things done. So if we look at their cookbook, we can see we've got a whole bunch of these in here. So the other ones that I was looking at were the sort of actual agentic workflows. If you want to do stuff in parallel, they've got a workflow for doing that. So you can see where you're splitting things up, sending them to different workers, and then using a kind of MapReduce thing where you basically bring everything back and then synthesize it together to get the final response out. They've got that in here. But some of the ones that probably are really interesting in here is just things like the financial analyst and stuff like that. So we can see, okay, here are their MCPs. They've got very simple MCP servers in there. we can see that the code for setting this kind of thing up is actually not really that complicated. That once we've got the MCPs set up and we're passing them in, it's going to take care of the sort of chat elements for this for us quite easily, and handling the various messages that come back, and be able to show us UI of actually what's going on in the background. Again, looking at the GitHub one that we saw the video of earlier on, we can see that it's using MCPs. In this case, it's nice to see that they're using both an SSE client as well as the studio. So one of the things I find very frustrating with some of the frameworks is that they're not always clear on how to deal with a SSE MCP versus a standard IO MCP. So we can see here the logic for if it returns back to use the tool, how does that get executed? And the cool thing with all of these examples is they're actually quite short. So you can learn the lessons from them quite quickly and work out, okay, how you would apply this to your agent. So they've got a variety of ones in here. Some of them, the travel assistant is using all fake data and stuff like that. It's really quite simple. But again, they're enough to get you started on this. One of the ones that is a little bit more complicated and actually quite interesting is this whole multi-agent earnings call thing. So you can see here where the idea is we've got a pre-processing layer where we're taking in PDFs, uses Mistral OCR for doing that. It then splits up to different agents and then creates a whole thing going on where you can basically generate a report or you can answer questions in here. So in this collab, one of the key things you've got is actually just getting the PDF earnings calls and then being able to see how does it actually process this, and then how does it have the sub agents that do different elements of it. So whether one of them is an insight thing, one of them's a risk thing. This is interesting to see how they're doing it. They're also using structured output. So they're defining the classes with Pydantic, etc. So you can see what it's going to get out for each sort of financial insight in there. And then it's going to pass back a list of insights. We can see that each of the different agents has got this nice structured output in here, as well as having the full sort of PDF parser in there, and then getting to the specialized agents. So we can see each agent has got its system prompt. It's got its instructions of what should be done. It's got that it's going to be using a structured model. In this case, that's the Mistral large model that they're using there. And one of the ones that I found interesting in here was this whole temporal analysis agent, which I thought was interesting just to see how they're doing that in there. Finally, here, you've got multiple ways that the user can interact with this. So it can be through Q&A, or it can be through a generation. So you've got this query processor for handling this. And then you've got the orchestration layer where it's basically putting it all together to be able to create these reports on the fly, but then also be able to answer questions and stuff. And then finally down the bottom, we can see like actually executing it, where it'll go through and actually process these transcripts, where we get out the actual information. We've got the report being generated. And then finally making the markdown file where we can see that, okay, this is actually put together a report for the different things in there. So overall, I would say this is definitely an interesting idea. I can't help but feel that it would have been really nice to see something like this from Anthropic come out with their really powerful models and being able to do it there. I think people would have gotten really excited by that. It is very cool, though, that Mistral's actually done this. And there's some good docs in here. You can see how to do the basic agents, how to use the different connectors, how to do handoffs and function calling, etc. So check it out, especially if you're interested perhaps in getting these models on-prem. I know one of my customers now is running one of the Mistral models on-prem. And that's certainly one of the advantages with these smaller companies, is that they're much more open to even take their proprietary models and license them to people to run on-prem. And you can imagine that a lot of those on-prem deployments are going to want to be doing agents. And this gives them a pathway to actually create agentic systems for the organization that they're being deployed in. So overall, very interesting kind of thing. I'm curious to see where it goes. It does bring up some issues, which I think I'll follow up with another video around when we're moving away from just using these things as models and more using them as an ecosystem. That raises a number of different issues. So I think I'll do a video about that over the next week or so. All right, as always, if you found the video useful, please click like and subscribe, and I will talk to you in the next video. Bye for now.